My name is Roger Pierce, and I'm very happy to stand here and look into these bright spotlights. I can't see. I hear you, but I can't see you. I know you must be there. What a delight to welcome you to Aldea this morning on this beautiful, beautiful Easter Sunday morning. I hope it's been a good morning for you so far, that you found all of the eggs that were hidden. And did you do that as kids, find Easter eggs? Oh, yeah. Well, you will find a delight for your spirit this morning, and I'm glad that you're here. If this perhaps is the first time for your presence here with us, a special welcome to you and an invitation for you to stop out by the welcome table and see what's there in terms of activities, lists of those, and maybe even a little special gift for you. I'm happy to welcome you because this is a very special place. It's Aldea. It's a village. That's what the word means when it's translated into the English. And in this village are some common people who have a very uncommon concern for the welfare and the blessing of the planet on which we live and all the people who walk around on this planet. And we are here today to celebrate and to be together and to rejoice in each other in this wonderful village called Aldea. I have been a pastor, ordained pastor, for 59 years. I can't believe it. That's old.
Yeah, we're with you here, brother.
That's old. And in that time, in a variety of places and circumstances, I've preached lots of Easter sermons and given Easter talks at various times. And I've always, out of my Christian tradition, approached it in a very traditional way. And the question of Easter is always, for most people, is there life after death? What does it mean about death and new life? I've been thinking about it, and I think if I had to do it again, I might rephrase the question a little bit, and I would ask, is there life before death? Is there a way that we can live together creatively and lovingly? And that's where Aldea comes into the picture, because this place gives us an opportunity to do just that, to live a way that is authentic and loving and caring for everybody, not just a few, but for everybody, without exception. And that's why this place is called, in its motto, if you like, or if in its foundational statement, love, period. Because I believe, that love is the authentic foundation of living together creatively and caringly. And so I hope that today will be a moment for you to think about life in its present moment in reflection of the times when we're looking ahead and thinking about rebirth. That's really what Easter is about too, isn't it? We recognize the terms like empty tomb and cross and resurrection. And it's about change, new things happening. In a little while, Jake is going to talk to us and expand that idea, I know, and in the midst of his conversation with us, he will say, I suspect, that change is not easy. And you have discovered that for yourself, as I have. It's difficult sometimes to give up the comfortable and the secure and the things that have meaning in our lives, to kind of set them aside in order for something else even greater, even grander to come along. And so today is the day when we might listen carefully to what is happening and moving in our midst and give some thanks for the opportunity to see new life, the possibility of new life growing all around us. So on this Easter Sunday, I announce to you the possibility that in this time today, in this hour, this may be your moment. This may be the word that you've been listening for. Welcome to Aldea. Welcome to the village. And a good Easter to everybody. Thank you.
We have been on quite a journey over the past couple of weeks. We've been on a journey really exploring the various stages that we go through as human beings on the way to resurrection. And we see these stages played out in the Easter story and in the progression of Easter weekend. So a couple weeks ago, we started this conversation and we said that Friday, Good Friday, is a symbol for the losses, the changes, the endings, and even the deaths that we all experience in our lives. Then you have Saturday, Holy Saturday, a time of waiting, a time of uncertainty, a time of unknowing, of being in the liminal spaces of life. And then here we are, Sunday, a day of rebirth, a day of renewal, a day of resurrection. And it's good because over the past couple of weeks, I've been asking you to do some mental gymnastics, right? Because you're like, it's Sunday, but it's Friday, and then it's Sunday, but it's actually Saturday. So today it's Sunday, and we're talking about Easter Sunday, and it is Easter Sunday, and we're talking about it. And it's the day that we're on, and I feel like we may be the only church that has to caveat that, right? Like, it's Easter Sunday, and we're talking about Easter Sunday. But all that to say, I'm glad we're here together. And we are a community of diverse spiritual beliefs, traditions, backgrounds, and we welcome that diversity because it makes us stronger, it makes us wiser, we connect to each other through our uniqueness. And so if you come here to Aldea throughout the year, you're going to hear all kinds of perspectives and frames about how we look at and approach life as a human being, life as a spiritual being, what it means to be alive and to live in love, period. But one of those perspectives that we find to be quite fascinating, compelling, and life-giving is the Jesus story, particularly this time of year, this idea of resurrection. And so approaching it from a symbolic point of view, looking for the universal themes of this story. And there's a specific part of this story that I really want to hone in on today. And I think it's a real simple part of this story. In fact, you may even consider it to just be a mere detail in this story, and yet I find it to be so compelling. And it's basically this. In the resurrection story, when Jesus appears to his followers, even in his divine transfigured form, he still retains the scars, the wounds of his death. They are a part of the story. They are essential to the story. And there are a couple places that it describes his wounds being there amidst the resurrection. One of them, John 20:20, Jesus entered, stood among them, and said, "Peace to you." Then he showed them his hands and side. And you might be saying, well, it doesn't explicitly say that he had his scars. Well, a couple things. First, his hands and his side, those were the places where he was pierced. But also, have you ever showed up to a party or a gathering and just been like, hey, everyone, here's my hands, here's my side, right? It's just not a common greeting. And it wasn't common back then either. It's very unique to this story. It's his way of identifying himself in this new form that retains with it part of what he went through. And so this is a bit of the blueprint for where we're going to go today. Right? And you may, there's all different experience levels, backgrounds, people of different paths here today. So you might approach this story in vastly different ways. Some of you might appreciate it more on a metaphoric or symbolic level, maybe others more literal. But regardless, all of that's welcome here. And in this series, however, we've been approaching this idea of rebirth and how it shows up in our personal lives, how it shows up in our collective experience on this planet as human beings. And we recognize that on the way to resurrection, we experience something alike a death, and we also experience a time of waiting, a time of uncertainty, of silence. So the road to rebirth is anything but easy, right? Resurrection is not simply a return to the way things were. It doesn't ignore the pain that we have gone through to get here. No. Resurrection takes the loss of Friday, the uncertainty of Saturday, and it holds them as essential and vital. As Franciscan priest and mystic Richard Rohr writes, Jesus' wounds were not erased by resurrection, they were transformed. That is the pattern. Perhaps it is the same for us. Perhaps our wounds and our scars are not merely erased, but they are transformed. That we don't just go back to what was, but we move forward into something entirely new. And in that new reality, our scars are reminders of what we have been through. Perhaps they are even badges of honor. My mom, a few years before I was born, was in a very, very serious car accident that almost took her life. And so when I was growing up, even as a child, I saw on her, she had these visible scars from this experience. And yet I look back and I realized that for my entire childhood, I saw these scars as something of wonder and amazement. I saw this thing that she had miraculously survived and been brought through. So I saw them as beautiful and something worthy of awe. And as I've gotten older, I've realized they tell a story of something that actually, if it had gone even a little differently, I myself wouldn't be here. So these scars tell this story of what she endured. They tell a story of a miracle. They're beautiful. They tell this story, and sometimes our scars too, they give warnings, right? They let us know something that maybe we don't want to repeat or something we want to remember for our own well-being moving forward into the future. In Europe, there is something called the stumbling stones. They began to be created in the 1990s. There are 90,000 stumbling stones across Europe, which make it the largest decentralized monument on the planet. And the stumbling stones, basically, you will find them outside of the last known living space of someone who was taken and killed during the Holocaust. And so these are spread out all across Europe, and the idea is that you would stumble on them, right? You would be walking, and yet your path would be interrupted, and you would be reminded of what has happened, something to remember, right? A warning, a sense of deep remembrance of tragedy, of not only what has happened, but what could happen. And so the question I have for you is, what are some stumbling stones in your life, right? What are some scars that you should not simply paint over, right? And our scars aren't necessarily physical, right? There are moments in our lives that perhaps are some of the most painful things we have ever gone through, and yet what we learned was invaluable. The ways that it opened our heart, we wouldn't trade for anything. We look at our world today, right, with all that we go through, all that we're going through, that if we're going to have hope of rebirth, I think that the reality that there are going to be some scars and some wounds, that's guaranteed, right? But may they be like stumbling stones, right? To raise our awareness, to raise our consciousness, for us to remember and remember rightly, that going back to the way things were, that is not an option, friends, not as a world and not as individuals. As Cynthia Bourgeault, who wrote the book, The Wisdom Jesus, says, resurrection is not a coming back to life as we knew it, but a going forward into a life we have never known. That path into a brand new, reborn life, it's going to take courage, sure. It's going to take a willingness to adopt new perspectives. Friends, it's going to take some faith so that we might see what has not yet come to be. And we may see some things that are unfamiliar. We might find that things do not look as we expect them to look. We see this reflected in the Easter story. Some of the female followers of Jesus go to his gravesite to lay burial spices and to pay respects and honor the body. They encounter something surprising. It says this in Luke 24, 1-8. At the crack of dawn on Sunday, the women came to the tomb carrying the burial spices they had prepared. They found the entrance stone rolled back from the tomb, so they walked in. But once inside, they couldn't find the body of the Master Jesus. They were puzzled, wondering what to make of this. Then out of nowhere, it seemed, two men, light cascading over them, stood there. The women were awestruck and bowed down in worship. The men said, "Why are you looking for the living one in a cemetery? Why are you looking for something that is alive and has been reborn in a place of death?" Sometimes, friends, when we lose something, it is wise and it is prudent to look for it in the last place that we lost it, surely, right? I have, this reusable water bottle, and it is something that I carry with me pretty much at all times. The only reason I don't have it on stage with me is because Olivia has told me not to. Other than that, I would have it with me everywhere I go. I have lost it many places because of this. I have lost it on planes and trains and movie theaters, and I actually have not lost it on a train. I haven't been on a train in quite a while. But I did lose it on a plane once, and I realized it as we were all deplaning, and I did the brave thing. I turned around, and the line, right? There is no fiercer, more powerful current than people trying to deplane. And I went against the grain, and I went in there, and I got my water bottle, right? I've left it in a movie theater, right? I think I went in, and the next movie had already started, and I'm like, I'm getting it, It can be prudent to look for things where you lost it. But when it comes to transformation, right? When it comes to new life, renewal, rebirth, like this story, why are we looking for something where it died when it has been reborn? Right? A beautiful example of this, I love, and we talked about this more last year around this time of year, but this idea of the butterfly, right? And why would we look for the butterfly at the site of the broken cocoon? No, it's gone. It's already flying. It's engaging in its new life. And I think this can be helpful for us as we await change in our world. Perhaps we shouldn't look for innovation and change in our world in the places where the problems were created. Right? Like, why are we looking to corporations that created all these problems to be the ones to fix these problems? Maybe it's not those corporations that are going to fix it. Or maybe, why is it that we're looking to status quo politicians to innovate and change politics? Maybe we need to look in some different places. Renewal will invite us to do that. It's going to invite us to look in some unexpected places, and even to realize that what we encounter might not look the same way. There are multiple instances in the resurrection story that the disciples do not even recognize Jesus. And I don't think it's because he came down with like a new hat and scarf. He's not like, I'm trying a new look, guys. No, it's his appearance, this transformation shifted all expectation, and they just simply, their minds, their hearts weren't even prepared for what they were going to encounter. So the question I have for you is, have you experienced transformation in your life, rebirth in your life, that maybe even left you unrecognizable to yourself, to others? Maybe places that were familiar to you all of a sudden became unfamiliar. Maybe you started experiencing feelings that were unfamiliar, or feelings you thought you might experience, you no longer do. I spoke to someone this week who's going through tremendous hardship, loss, change, difficulty in their life. And yet they said to me, I am in so much peace, it almost is shocking. It's almost hard to even fathom. I almost feel guilty for the amount of peace that I feel. And for me, I realized it was a sign this person had transformed so much that they were unfamiliar to themselves. Friends, it can be valuable for us to show up to our life, to show up to things, maybe expecting to be surprised, expecting to see the unexpected or the unfamiliar. I at one point in my life took this a little too far, though. I will tell you a story. About 15 years ago, late teens, early 20s, I was getting tacos on the beach, which outs me as a Californian. Very Californian story and detail. No? I don't know. There's no beaches here, so this obviously didn't take place in Tucson. So I order my tacos, me and my friend order, and I ordered some chicken tacos, and I go sit down, and a couple minutes later, I am brought out this plate. What I now know, looking back, was not chicken tacos. It was a shrimp salad. But at the time, I think I was just trying to be very open. And I thought, well, maybe this restaurant just does chicken very differently. Maybe they do tacos differently. I want to show up humble to this new experience of life, right? I don't know. Who am I to say? And then a couple minutes later, I am brought by a server what is definitively chicken tacos. And so after I'm eating this shrimp salad, and I give him this look of like, yeah, I realize I did a bad thing, I know. And so I said, oh, I'm sorry, I guess I didn't realize that I was eating someone else's order. And the server looked at me, I'll never forget it because these words are burned into my mind, verbatim. He said, that's okay, it happens all the time here, but next time, if you could just please remember what you ordered. And I got kind of upset because I was thinking to myself, sir, I didn't forget what I ordered. I was questioning what chicken tacos even are. I like to look back on that story and think, oh, maybe I was just being existentially humble. The reality is I was probably just really shy, and maybe even the more honest reality is I was a little hungry, because then I got 2 entrees out of it, right? But the point I'm making is that with rebirth, the familiar may be rendered unfamiliar. Maybe it's good to show up prepared to see things that we're not even able to recognize. The problem is that generally when we encounter the unfamiliar, we tend to have a negative reaction to it, right? Sometimes the fear of the new holds us back. That pretty much is most of what fear is, fear of the unknown. And what is the new if not the unknown? Sometimes we even prefer the known, even if it's toxic, even if it's dysfunctional. In other words, without realizing it, sometimes we choose to stay in the grave than be reborn. Waking up is not always a graceful process. Coming alive is not a graceful process, right? I told you I woke up much earlier this morning than I normally do. It was not pretty. It was, I'm going to try to do a reenactment of it right now. It's kind of, this is me sleeping this morning. Just me. And then my alarm goes off, and all of a sudden it's just like trying to survive. Something out of like The Exorcist or something like that. If you're not watching online, if you're just listening to the podcast, I just did a very scary pose. That's all you need to know. And I say that to say that I understand that it's not always easy to experience the new, to wake up into a new day. It can be very uncomfortable. If rebirth is knocking at your door, if resurrection is knocking at your door, and it's not a little scary, it's not a little uncomfortable, then I would question if it is truly rebirth. Or maybe it's just Temu rebirth. Anyone know what okay. That joke's gonna land more for people who know what Temu is. So I'll explain Temu. Temu is like knockoff Amazon. And you're thinking Amazon is like knockoff everything else. So then that just tells you how knockoff Temu is. And it also shows you that if I have to explain a joke this much, it's probably not that good of a joke. Point being, when we grow, when we evolve as human beings, there is going to be a certain level of discomfort. Right? Remember just school and going into the next grade. It's so awkward because it's all brand new, right? Entering into a new job. It can be so uncomfortable, so much to figure out. And yet, if we're not experiencing that type of discomfort from time to time, then friends, I wonder if we've gotten a little too comfortable. The invitation, I think, is here, that if we want to experience rebirth, then perhaps we would be willing to let go, which is the invitation of Friday. Perhaps we would be willing to sit in the uncertainty and the not knowing and the waiting, which is the invitation of Saturday. And perhaps we would be willing to move ahead into the unfamiliar and even the unrecognizable, for that is the invitation of Sunday. And yet, one thing that is recognizable of this resurrected Jesus is his scars. And I think what's so powerful about that is that it's a reminder that no one part of this process is more important than the others, right? When we're talking about cycles of life, all stages are valuable, right? Rebirth is not more important or more valuable than the death or the waiting, right? This is not like a BLT where we can act like the bacon, lettuce, and tomato are all on equal footing, but that's just, that's not real. Like, we know the bacon is doing the heavy lifting there. But not so with this life, death, resurrection cycle, right? All of it matters. Every part matters. It all belongs. Your story, it's all part of it. Right? So I don't know what hard part you're going through right now, but would you recognize that it belongs, right? The salty allows for the sweet and vice versa. I've learned this a lot. My partner Olivia, she is a baker. She makes these really fantastic cookies. You may or may not have tried them, but if you have, they are some of the best cookies I've ever had in my life. And the secret, which I don't know if it's not like a secret that, I'm not going to get in trouble for this secret, but I think you could probably have figured it out a little bit. But one of the powerful secrets that I've learned about these cookies is that there is a certain amount of salt in these cookies. And you might be going, that sounds absurd, salt on a sweet cookie. But I've come to learn that what makes a cookie truly great is the amount of salt, right? And it's because the salt brings forth the sweetness. So I've become a little bit pretentious about cookies. We'll be living life, and I'll eat a cookie that doesn't have enough or any salt, and I'll look at her and I'll just be like, no salt, and it just kind of, I'm sorry about that. But it's taught me a lot about life. It's taught me that the salty and the sweet, they go together. They complement each other, the yin and the yang. So I don't know what's salty for you right now in your life. I don't know what is uncomfortable. I don't know what wounds you are facing and you are tending to that feel like they are more than you can bear. I don't know where you might feel like you're at the end of your rope. But what if you could recognize that it is part of your rebirth cycle? And frankly, when we look at the world, I think we're all struggling to figure out and to understand. No one really knows exactly where we are, what part of the cycle we're in, exactly what's happening. So none of us have the answers there. But in lieu of answers, I do have at least something I deeply hope for, or something I might consider to be faith. And it's a faith not that has any kind of thing figured out, not faith that's grounded in any sort of certainty, but rather a faith that says, if this is the cycle, right? If this is what seems to happen throughout nature, throughout all of the universe, and certainly in our lives, then perhaps something is coming, light is coming, dawn is coming, even when I sit in the darkness. Perhaps one of the best, most succinct ways of explaining this comes from the great sage and mystic Rabindranath Tagore, who said that faith is a bird that feels the light and sings while the dawn is still dark. May we be like that bird. May we be the kind of people that can have faith, that where there is darkness, there will also be a new dawn. That where there is death, there may also be a rebirth. Where there is a crisis, perhaps there is also an opportunity. Where there's an ending, there will be a new beginning. Where there's a closing, there will be an opening. Where something falls apart, something else will be rebuilt. And when something has been crucified on Friday, it may yet be resurrected on Sunday.